In the glittering chaos of 1920s Hollywood, a cursed mirror on the set of The Silver Veil unleashes terror, shattered glass, deadly accidents, and ghostly faces that vanish in the dark. Why is starlet Clara Vane targeted by chilling threats? What secrets does the mirror hold from a silent film star's scandalous past? Join Miss Jane Marple as she unravels a web of ambition, betrayal, and sabotage in a suspense-filled mystery where every reflection hides a deadly truth. Chapter 1. The invitation to Tinseltown. The letter arrived on a crisp autumn morning, its creamy envelope embossed with the gilded crest of Sunset Studios. Miss Jane Marple, seated by her cottage window in St. Mary Mead, adjusted her spectacles and slit it open with a silver letter knife. The paper smelled faintly of jasmine, a scent as out of place in her cozy parlor as the words within. Clara Vane, Hollywood's reigning starlet, requested her presence on a film set in Los Angeles. A cursed mirror, Clara claimed, was wreaking havoc. Accidents, whispers of ghostly apparitions, and a creeping dread that threatened her latest picture. Miss Marple's reputation for unraveling mysteries had crossed the Atlantic, and Clara, it seemed, was desperate. Hollywood, Miss Marple murmured, her lips twitching with amusement. She'd never been one for the flicker of cinema screens, but the puzzle intrigued her. A cursed mirror. Superstition, perhaps, but Miss Marple knew better than to dismiss fear as mere fancy. Fear had a way of pointing to truth, however twisted. By noon, she'd booked passage on a transatlantic liner, her knitting tucked into a sensible valise, her mind already turning over the possibilities. The journey to Los Angeles was a blur of ocean spray and idle chatter with fellow passengers, none of whom suspected the unassuming spinster in the tweed skirt was bound for a mystery. Upon arrival, a sleek black Rolls-Royce awaited her at the port. Its driver, a nervous young man named Eddie, who fidgeted with his cap as he introduced himself. "Miss Vane's real particular about you coming quick, ma'am," he said, his voice tinged with awe. "Says you're the only one who can fix this mess, does she, now?" Miss Marple replied, her eyes twinkling as she settled into the plush back seat. "Tell me, Eddie, what sort of mess are we dealing with?" Eddie glanced at her in the rearview mirror, his knuckles whitening on the wheel. "It's that mirror, ma'am. Big, old thing, all carved with funny symbols. Been on the set since they started shooting The Silver Veil. First, a camera fell smashed to bits. Then Miss Vane's stunt double twisted her ankle something awful. Folks say the mirror's got a mind of its own. Shows things faces sometimes that ain't there." Miss Marple nodded, her fingers absently tracing the handle of her valise. "And what do you think, Eddie?" He hesitated, then muttered, "I think it's a load of hogwash. But I seen Miss Vane stare into it once, and she looked like she'd seen a ghost, went white as a sheet." The drive to Sunset Studios wound. Through palm-lined boulevards, the city sprawling under a sky too blue to be trusted. Miss Marple observed the glittering billboards, each proclaiming Clara Vane's latest triumph. The starlet's face heart-shaped, with luminous eyes and a pout that promised both innocence and dangers stared down from every corner. Yet Eddie's unease suggested a different Clara, one gripped by fear. The studio gates loomed ahead, wrought, iron-crowned with a golden sunburst. Beyond them, Sunset Studios buzzed with activity, extras in glittering costumes, carpenters hammering sets, and a megaphone-wielding assistant director barking orders. Eddie led Miss Marple through the chaos, to a private bungalow draped in book. Inside, Clara Vane awaited, reclining on a velvet chaise like a queen holding court. Miss Marple. Clara rose, her silk gown shimmering as she extended a manicured hand. She was even more striking in person, her auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon, her eyes a startling green. Yet there was a brittleness to her smile, a tremor in her fingers. "I can't thank you enough for coming. I'm at my wit's end." "Tell me everything, my dear," Miss Marple said, settling into a cushioned chair. She declined the offer of champagne, opting instead for a cup of tea, which a silent maid promptly delivered. "Start with this mirror." Clara paced, her heels clicking on the polished floor. "It's an antique from the silent film days. Belonged to Lillian Devol, a star who vanished in 1924. The studio bought it at auction for the silver valets, perfect for the Gothic aesthetic. But ever since we brought it onto the set, things have gone wrong. Equipment fails, people get hurt, and—" She hesitated, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I've seen things in it, reflections that don't match. A woman's face, sometimes, watching me." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her expression serene but her mind alert. "And what does the director think of this?" "Lionel Hurst." Clara's laugh was sharp. "He thinks it's all publicity gold. Mystery sells tickets, he says. But he's been acting strange, too obsessed with the mirror, sketching it in his notebook. I think he knows more than he's letting on." A knock interrupted them. The door swung open to reveal a tall man with slicked back hair and a smile that gleamed like polished ivory. "Clara, darling, you didn't tell me we had a guest." He strode forward, exuding charm. "Victor Blake, leading man. You must be the famous Miss Marple." "Charmed, Mr. Blake," Miss Marple said, noting the way his eyes lingered on Clara, possessive yet calculating. "I understand you're filming quite the spectacle." Victor chuckled, dropping into a chair without invitation. "The silver veil is a masterpiece in the making. Clara's the heart of it, of course, though this mirror nonsense is stealing her spotlight." His tone was playful, but Miss Marple caught a flicker of irritation in his gaze. "It's not nonsense." Clara snapped, her cheeks flushing. "You saw what happened to the camera last week. And don't pretend you haven't noticed the crew whispering." Victor shrugged, his smile unwavering. "Superstition runs rampant on sets. You know that, darling. Miss Marple, you'll sort this out, won't you? We can't have our star jumping at shadows." Miss Marple inclined her head, her eyes never leaving Victor's face. "I shall do my best, Mr. Blake. Perhaps you could show me this mirror." Clara led the way to the soundstage, a cavernous space where a half-built ballroom set gleamed under harsh lights. The mirror stood at its center, an imposing piece nearly 7 feet tall, its frame carved with serpentine vines and strange, rune-like symbols. Its surface was flawless, catching the light in a way that seemed to pull the eye inward, as if it held secrets just beyond reach. Miss Marple approached, her reflection small and unassuming in the vast glass. For a moment, she thought she saw a ripple, a faint distortion at the edge of her vision. She blinked, and it was gone. "Remarkable," she murmured, her fingers hovering near the frame but not touching it. "And where was it kept before the auction?" Clara frowned. "Some old estate in Pasadena, I think. Lionel would know more. He's the one who insisted we use it." As if summoned, Lionel Hurst appeared, a wiry man with a shock of grey hair and eyes that darted like a cornered animal's. "Miss Marple," he said, his voice clipped, "I hope you're not here to indulge Clara's hysterics. We've a schedule to keep." "Merely seeking clarity, Mr. Hurst," Miss Marple replied, her tone mild. "This mirror has quite a history, I gather." Lionel's jaw tightened. It's a prop, nothing more. Lillian Duval's estate sold it off decades ago. If Clara would focus on her lines instead of ghost stories, we'd be ahead of schedule. Clara bristled, but before she could retort, a crash echoed from the rafters. A spotlight swayed precariously, its cable frayed. Crew members shouted, scrambling to secure it. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed as she scanned the catwalks above, catching a glimpse of a figure slipping into the shadows. Too quick to identify, but deliberate in movement. "Goodness," she said, her voice calm. "Another accident." Lionel cursed under his breath, barking orders to the crew. Clara clutched Miss Marple's arm, her voice trembling. "You see, it's not just me. That mirror Dix cursed." Miss Marple patted her hand, her mind racing. "Perhaps, my dear or perhaps someone wishes us to believe it is." She excused herself, slipping away to explore the soundstage's perimeter. The crew was too busy to notice an old lady poking about, and Miss Marple had always found invisibility a useful trait. Near a stack of crates, she overheard two stagehands whispering. "Told you, Frankie," one muttered, a wiry man with a scar on his cheek. "That mirror's bad news. I heard Hurst arguing with someone about it last night. Sounded like he was scared." "Scared of what?" The other, a burly fellow with a cigar stub, scoffed. "It's just a hunk of glass." Not to Hurst. He was yelling about keeping it hidden. Said something about a deal gone wrong. Miss Marple tucked this tidbit away, her expression unchanging as she returned to Clara. The starlet was pale, her eyes fixed on the mirror. "You believe me now, don't you?" Clara asked. "I believe there's more to this than meets the eye," Miss Marple said gently. "But fear not, my dear, I've seen many a mystery, and they all unravel in time." That evening, Clara insisted Miss Marple stay in the guest suite adjoining her bungalow, a gesture both kind and telling. The suite was a study in excess, gold-trimmed wallpaper, a four-poster bed draped in silk, and a vanity with its own mirror mercifully ordinary. As Miss Marple unpacked her knitting, she considered the day's events. The mirror's effect was undeniable, but whether it was supernatural or a clever ruse remained unclear. Clara's fear was genuine, Victor's charm to practiced, and Lionel's defensiveness intriguing. The shadowy figure in the catwalks suggested sabotage, but to what end? She crossed to the window, gazing out at the studio lot, now quiet under a starless sky. Her reflection caught her eye not in the vanity mirror, but in the glass of the window. For a heartbeat, it seemed to flicker, as if another face peered back, pale and indistinct. Miss Marple turned sharply, but the room was empty. She smiled faintly, undeterred. "Well, now," she said to herself, settling into a chair with her knitting needles. "This shall be interesting." The click of her needles filled the silence, a steady rhythm as her mind wove together the threads of the mystery. The mirror was the key, but its cursive, it existed, was only part of the puzzle. Someone, or something, wanted Clara afraid, and Miss Marple was determined to find out why. For now, she was content, the day's discoveries a satisfying start to a case that promised to be as dazzling and dangerous as Hollywood itself. Chapter 2. Shadows. On the set. The morning sun blazed over Sunset Studios, casting long shadows across the bustling soundstage. Miss Jane Marple, her straw hat perched primly, navigated the chaos of the film set with the quiet confidence of someone who'd seen village fates descend into greater disarray. The air hummed with the clatter of hammers, the whine of saws, and the shouted directions of a harried assistant director. The silver veil was in full production, and the cursed mirror loomed at the heart of the ballroom set, its carved frame glinting like a predator biding its time. Clara Vane, resplendent in a sapphire gown that hugged her curves, was rehearsing a scene under the watchful eye of Lionel Hurst. The director's voice cut through the din, sharp and impatient. "Clara, darling, more longing. You're pining for a lost love, not ordering a sandwich." Clara's lips tightened, but she nodded, her eyes flickering toward the mirror. Miss Marple, seated discreetly on a folding chair near a pile of coiled cables, noted the starlet's unease. The mirror's presence was a weight, palpable even in the midday glare. Miss Marple's first task was to understand the set's rhythm. She watched the crew, grips hauling lights, costumers fussing over sequins, a script girl scribbling notes. Each moved with purpose, yet there was a nervous edge, glances darting toward the mirror as if it might spring to life. She approached a young prop master, a lanky fellow named Tommy, who was polishing a candelabra with more vigor than necessary. "Good morning, young man," Miss Marple said, her smile disarming. "That's a fine piece. Part of the set, I presume." Tommy glanced up, startled, then relaxed under her grandmotherly gaze. "Yes, ma'am, for the ballroom scene. Gotta make everything look like $1,000,000. He hesitated, his cloth slowing. "You're that detective lady, ain't you? Hear about the mirror?" "Something like that," Miss Marple replied, her eyes twinkling. "Tell me, have you noticed anything peculiar about it?" Tommy leaned closer, his voice low. "It's creepy, that's what. Heavy as sin, took 4 of us to move it. And the way it catches light, it's like it's watching you. Last week, I swear, I saw it fog up like someone was breathing on it, but no one was there." "Fascinating," Miss Marple said, her tone encouraging. "And the accidents? Have you seen anything odd?" Tommy shrugged, but his eyes darted toward a cluster of stagehands. "Folks talk. Say it's the ghost of Lillian Duval, mad her mirrors being used. Me, I think it's just bad luck, but—" He lowered his voice further. "I saw Mitch, one of the grips, messing with the rigging before that camera fell. Looks sneaky, but he's a good guy. Probably nothing." Miss Marple thanked him, tucking the name Mitch into her mental ledger. She strolled toward the mirror, pretending to admire its craftsmanship while scanning the set. The ballroom was a marvel of artifice. Crystal chandeliers, gilded moldings, and a polished floor that reflected the lights above. Yet the mirror dominated, its surface an abyss that seemed to swallow the scene rather than reflect it. Clara finished her take, and Lionel called for a break. The starlet hurried over, her face pale despite her rouge. "Miss Marple, you've seen it now. Doesn't it feel wrong?" "It's certainly striking," Miss Marple said, her voice soothing. "But let's not leap to curses just yet. Tell me about the crew. Anyone with a grudge?" Clara bit her lip. "Mitch, maybe. Here's a grip, been here forever. Wanted a promotion to gaffer, but Lionel passed him over. He's been surly ever since. Oh, and Victor's been pushing everyone's buttons, acting like he owns the place. But that's just Victor." Miss Marple nodded, her mind cross-referencing Tommy's tip. Before she could probe further, a piercing shriek split the air. All eyes turned to a lighting rig high above, where a massive spotlight swayed, its cables snapping with a sound like a whip. The crew scattered, shouting, as the light plunged toward Clara. Instinct took over. Miss Marple grabbed Clara's arm, pulling her back just as the spotlight crashed onto the set, shattering glass and splintering wood. Dust swirled, and Clara clung to Miss Marple, trembling. "It's happening again," she whispered. Lionel stormed over, his face a mask of fury. "What the devil is wrong with this place? Somebody check that rigging." He glared at the crew, who scrambled to obey. Miss Marple, however, was already moving, her eyes fixed on the catwalk above. A flicker of movement caught her attention, a figure in dark clothing, slipping through a service door. Too swift to identify, but the deliberate haste suggested intent. "Stay with Clara," Miss Marple told a nearby assistant, her voice calm but firm. She made her way to the catwalk stairs, her sensible shoes silent on the metal steps. The upper level was a maze of cables and beams, lit by flickering work lights. She moved cautiously, her knitting bag slung over her shoulder like a detective's kit. At the far end, she found a severed cable, its edges frayed but too clean for an accident. A small Tula wire cutter lay discarded nearby, its handle smudged with grease. Miss Marple pocketed the cutter, wrapping it in a handkerchief. She descended, her mind buzzing. Sabotage was clear, but the motive was murky. Was someone targeting Clara, or was the mirror itself the goal? She rejoined the crew, where Lionel was berating a red-faced gripmitch, she presumed, from Clara's description. He was broad-shouldered, with a weathered face and hands calloused from years of hauling equipment. "It wasn't me, Mr. Hurst," Mitch protested, his voice hoarse. "I checked that rig this morning. It was fine, then explain this." Lionel jabbed a finger at the wreckage. "You're off this picture, Mitch. Pack your things." Miss Marple stepped forward, her presence calming the tension. "Mr. Hurst, a moment. Might I speak with Mitch privately?" Lionel blinked, thrown by her audacity, but waved a hand. "Fine, 5 minutes." She led Mitch to a quiet corner, her expression kind but piercing. "Mitch, I'm Jane Marple. I understand you're upset about the gaffer position. Tell me, did you check the cables yourself, today?" Mitch's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. "Yeah, at dawn, everything was tight. I swear it. And did you see anyone near the rigging?" "Afterward." He hesitated, then muttered, "Saw Victor up there, poking around. Thought he was just being nosy, like always. He's got no business in the catwalks." Miss Marple's lips pursed. Victor Blake, the charming leading man, seemed to crop up everywhere. "Thank you, Mitch. You've been most helpful." She returned to Clara, who was sipping water, her hands still shaking. "Miss Marple, that could have killed me. You saved my life." "Nonsense, my dear," Miss Marple said, patting her hand. "Just a matter of timing. Now, let's get you somewhere quiet." They retreated to Clara's dressing room, a haven of silk curtains and jasmine-scented candles. Miss Marple settled into a plush chair, her knitting needles clicking as she thought. The wire cutter was a clue, but fingerprints were unlikely. Too many hands touched the set's tools. Mitch's story held water, but Victor's presence in the catwalk was troubling. Was he a saboteur or merely curious? And the mirror, its eerie pull was undeniable, but was it a cause or a convenient scapegoat? "Clara," Miss Marple said, her voice gentle, "tell me about Lillian Duval. What do you know of her?" Clara frowned, curling up on a chaise. "Not much. She was a big star in the silent era. Disappeared after a scandal, something about a lover, maybe. The mirror was her prized possession. They say she used it to practice her expressions, like it was her secret weapon." Miss Marple nodded, her needles pausing. A scandal, a lover, a mirror with a history threads were forming, but the pattern was incomplete. And Victor, has he shown interest in the mirror? Clara's eyes darkened. He's obsessed with his own reflection, if that counts. But he's been weird about the mirror. Too keeps joking about its curse, but it feels off, like he's hiding something. A knock interrupted them. Victor himself poked his head in, his smile as dazzling as ever. Clara, you're a trooper. Miss Marple, any theories yet? Or are we still chasing ghosts? Miss Marple met his gaze, her eyes sharp behind her spectacles. Ghosts are rarely the answer, Mr. Blake. But motives, those are worth chasing. Were you in the catwalk earlier? Victor's smile faltered, just for a moment. Me, up there, hardly. I was running lines with the script girl. Ask her if you like, I may, Miss Marple said, her tone pleasant but unyielding. Victor excused himself, his charm intact but strained as evening fell. Miss Marple lingered in Clara's bungalow, sipping tea and reviewing her notes. The day's events were a tangle, a sabotaged cable, a discarded tool, Mitch's grievance, Victor's suspicious presence. The mirror loomed over it all, its history a shadow stretching from the past. Yet she felt a quiet satisfaction. She'd ruled out Mitch as the primary culprit. His anger was real, but his surprise at the cable state seemed genuine. Victor, however, was another matter. His glibness hid something deeper, and Miss Marple intended to find out what. She glanced at her knitting, a scarf taking shape in soft lavender wool. The set was quiet now, the crew gone home, but the mirror remained, waiting. Tomorrow she'd dig into Lillian Duval's past, and perhaps the archives would yield more than whispers. For now, she was content. The day's progress a solid foundation for the mystery unfolding. Hollywood's glitter hid dark corners, and Miss Marple was ready to shine a light into them. Chapter 3. Whispers from the Past. The morning light filtered through the high windows of Sunset Studios' archive room, a dusty sanctuary of forgotten scripts and faded glamour. Miss Jane Marple, her tweed skirt brushed free of lint, sat at a long oak table strewn with brittle documents. The air smelled of old paper and secrets, and she relished the quiet. It was a place where truths, long buried, might surface. Her goal was clear: uncover the history of Lillian Duval and the cursed mirror that seemed to haunt. The Silver Veils production, the archive curator, a bespectacled woman named Agnes with a penchant for nervous chatter, had been reluctant to let an outsider rummage through the studio's past. But a kind word and a promise of discretion from Miss Marple softened her resistance. Lillian Duval's files are over there, Agnes said, pointing to a row of sagging boxes. But don't expect much. Her story's a sad one here, one day, gone the next. Sad stories often hold the most truth, Miss Marple replied, her eyes twinkling as she opened the first box. Inside were yellowed clippings, headshots of a doe-eyed Lillian in feathered headpieces, and a thin journal bound in cracked leather. She began with the clippings, her fingers careful as she sifted through tales of Lillian's rise to stardom in the early 1920s. One article hinted at a scandal rival actress, Evelyn Hart, accused Lillian of stealing a role and a lover, one Roland Kane, a dashing producer. The feud ended abruptly when Lillian vanished, leaving her mirror behind in a Pasadena mansion. The journal was more revealing. Lillian's looping script described the mirror as a gift from Roland, etched with symbols from some ancient tongue. She wrote of its uncanny clarity, how it seemed to see into my soul. But the final entries grew frantic. Evelyn knows. She threatens to expose us. The mirror shows her face now, not mine. Miss Marple's lips pursed. A love triangle, betrayal, and a mirror that reflected more than light here was a thread worth pulling. She tucked the journal into her bag, intending to study it further, and thanked Agnes, who was already distracted by a spilled coffee mug. Miss Marple's next stop was the soundstage, where Clara Vane was filming a pivotal scene. The ballroom set glowed under golden lights, the mirror at its center like a dark eye. Clara, in a flowing ivory dress, moved through her lines with a grace that belied her tension. Lionel Hurst, the director, paced behind the camera, his eyes darting between Clara and the mirror. Miss Marple slipped into a shadowed corner, observing. Victor Blake, dashing in a tailored suit, lounged nearby, his charm on full display as he bantered with a makeup artist. But his gaze kept straying to the mirror, a flicker of unease beneath his polished exterior. Miss Marple noted it, her mind connecting his behavior to Mitch's claim of seeing him in the catwalks. Was Victor merely curious, or was he entangled in something deeper? The scene wrapped, and Clara approached, her face pale. Miss Marple, any luck? I can't shake the feeling the thing she gestured at the mirror is watching me. Patience. My dear, Miss Marple said, her voice soothing. I've found some intriguing clues about Lillian Duval. Tell me, has Victor mentioned her at all? Clara frowned. Not directly, but he's been reading old studio gossip magazines. Ones from the 20s. Said it was for character research, but he was awfully secretive about it. Miss Marple nodded, filing this away. She was about to suggest a walk when Lionel called. For a late-night rehearsal, a rare occurrence that set the crew grumbling. The scene involved Clara alone with the mirror, delivering a monologue about a lost love. As the lights dimmed, the set took on an eerie stillness, the mirror's surface catching stray beams like a pool of liquid silver dot. Miss Marple settled into a chair near the back, her knitting needles clicking softly. The crew adjusted lights, their movements sluggish from the long day. Clara began her lines, her voice trembling with emotion. You took everything from me, and now you're gone. She paused, staring into the mirror, her breath catching. A gasp rippled through the crew as a faint glow pulsed from the glass, and Clara stumbled back, her eyes wide. There's a face, she cried. It's not mine. Pandemonium erupted. Lionel shouted for calm, but the crew surged forward, craning to see. Miss Marple rose, her movements swift despite her age, and reached Clara's side. Steady, my dear, she said, guiding her to a chair. She turned to the mirror, her gaze sharp. The glow was gone, but a faint mist lingered on the glass, dissipating. As she watched, it was her, Clara whispered, clutching Miss Marple's arm. Lillian, I'm sure of it. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. She approached the mirror, her reflection steady despite the crew's murmurs. Mr. Hurst, she called, her voice cutting through the chaos, might we examine the area behind the mirror? Lionel, flustered, waved a hand. Fine, but it's just a prop. Nothing's back there. 2 stagehands moved the mirror, revealing a narrow space cluttered with cables and a small projector, its lens aimed at the glass. Miss Marple knelt, her fingers tracing the device's edges. A clever trick, she murmured. Someone projected an image to frighten Clara. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Lionel's face reddened. Who's responsible for this? He demanded. No one answered, but Miss Marple caught Victor slipping toward the exit, his expression guarded. She let him go for now. The projector was a clue, but its operator had been swift to vanish. She returned to Clara, who was sipping water, her hands steadier. "It wasn't a ghost, was it?" Clara asked, her voice small. "Not likely," Miss Marple said, her tone kind but firm. "But someone wants you to believe it is. Tell me, who has access to the set after hours?" Clara hesitated. "Lionel, Victor, the lighting crew, and me, of course. The stagehands lock up, but they're not always thorough." Miss Marple nodded, her mind cataloguing suspects. The projector suggested technical know-how, ruling out casual pranksters. Lionel's obsession with the mirror, Victor's secretive research, and even Mitch's lingering resentment all bore scrutiny. But the journal's mention of Evelyn Hart and Roland Kane hinted at a deeper motive, one tied to the studio's past. As the crew dispersed, Miss Marple lingered, her eyes on the mirror. She stepped closer, peering at its frame. The carved symbol spirals and jagged lines seemed to shift in the dim light. Though she dismissed it as a trick of fatigue, still, the mirror's pull was undeniable, a silent challenge to her logic. She retired to Clara's bungalow, where a pot of tea awaited. Over steaming cups, she reviewed the journal's final pages, her knitting needles idle for once. Lillian's words grew increasingly paranoid. "Roland swears the mirror is safe, but Evelyn's threats grow bolder. She says it's cursed, that it traps desires. I see her in it now, always watching." Miss Marple's brow furrowed. A curse or a clever manipulation? The projector incident suggested the latter, but Lillian's fear felt too raw to be mere delusion. A soft knock startled her. It was Tommy, the prop master, his face pale. "Miss Marple, I didn't want to say earlier, but I found something in the prop room." A photo of Lillian Duval, tucked behind some old set pieces. She's standing with a man, Roland Kane, I think, and there's a woman in the background, glaring. Might be Evelyn Hart. "Bring it to me tomorrow," Miss Marple said, her voice calm but her pulse quickening. "And say nothing to anyone." Tommy nodded, slipping into the night. Miss Marple leaned back, her tea cooling. The projector was a setback for the saboteur, but they'd be more careful now. Victor's quick exit, Lionel's defensiveness, and the photo's discovery pointed to a web of motives, perhaps rooted in Lillian's scandal. Yet the mirror itself remained an enigma, its symbols a puzzle she couldn't yet crack. As she prepared for bed, Miss Marple felt a quiet satisfaction. The day had peeled back a layer of the mystery, exposing a deliberate hand behind Clara's fear. The journal and photo were solid leads, and the projector ruled out supernatural causes for now. She glanced at her reflection in the bungalow's small mirror, half expecting a flicker like the one in her suite. The glass was clear, but the weight of the case settled over her like a shawl. Tomorrow she'd chase the past further, and Hollywood's shadows would yield their secrets, one stitch at a time. Chapter 4. The Director's Secret. The morning air at Sunset Studios carried a tang of paint and sawdust. The set alive with the frenetic energy of a production racing against time. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting bag slung over her shoulder, moved through the soundstage with the quiet purpose of a gardener tending roses. Her mind, however, was far from serene, weaving together the threads of Lillian Duval's journal, the projector trick, and the mysterious photo Tommy had promised. Today, she turned her attention to Lionel Hurst, the director whose erratic behavior hinted at a deeper connection to the cursed mirror. Lionel was in his element, barking orders from behind a camera rig as Clara Vane glided through a scene, her ivory gown catching the light. The mirror stood sentinel, its carved frame gleaming with an almost mocking intensity. Miss Marple settled into a corner, her needles clicking softly, her eyes tracking Lionel's every move. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted a lens, and his gaze darted to the mirror more often than necessary. She noted the dark circles under his eyes, the nervous tick in his jaw, signs of a man under strain. During a break, Miss Marple approached him, her smile disarming. "Mr. Hurst, your vision for the silver veil is remarkable. This mirror, though it seems to hold a special place in your plans." Lionel's eyes narrowed, but he forced a chuckle. "It's a prop, Miss Marple. A stunning one, mind you. Sets the mood perfectly for Clara's scenes." "Indeed," she said, her tone mild. "I understand you chose it yourself. From Lillian Duval's estate, was it?" His face tightened, a flicker of unease crossing it. "The prop department sourced it. I just approved the look." "Why do you ask?" "Oh, merely curiosity," Miss Marple replied, her eyes twinkling. "Old things have such stories, don't they? I heard Lillian was quite particular about this." "Mirror," Lionel shrugged, but his fingers drummed on the camera. "She was a star. They're all particular. Now, if you'll excuse me, we're behind schedule." He turned away, his dismissal abrupt. Miss Marple's lips pursed. Lionel's defensiveness was a thread worth tugging. She drifted toward the prop room, where Tommy awaited with the promised photo. He handed her a faded sepia print, its edges curling. Lillian Duval stood center, radiant in a beaded gown, her arm linked with a handsome man, Roland Kane, presumably. Behind them, a woman with sharp features and a venomous glare lurked in the shadows. Evelyn Hart, Miss Marple suspected, her presence a silent accusation. "This was tucked behind a crate," Tommy whispered. "I didn't tell anyone, like you said." "You've done well, Tommy," Miss Marple said, slipping the photo into her bag. "Keep your eyes open, but be discreet." Back on the set, the day's filming progressed, but tension simmered. Clara, though flawless in her performance, cast wary glances at the mirror. Victor Blake, lounging between takes, was all charm. But Miss Marple caught him sketching the mirror's frame in a small notebook, his brow furrowed. She made a mental note to investigate his interest further. As evening fell, Lionel called for a critical scene. Clara's character confronting her lover's betrayal before the mirror. The set was hushed, the lights dimmed to a ghostly glow. Miss Marple watched from the sidelines, her knitting idle. Clara delivered her lines with raw intensity. "You promised me forever, but you left me to this cold reflection." Her voice broke, and she turned to the mirror, her eyes locking onto its surface. A sharp crack split the air. The prop gun in Clara's hand supposedly blank-loaded pistol fired, the shot grazing a light stand inches from Victor, who stood off camera. He yelped, diving to the floor as sparks flew. The crew froze, then erupted into chaos, shouting and scrambling. Clara dropped the gun, her face ashen. "That wasn't supposed to happen," she gasped. Miss Marple was at her side in an instant, her calm voice cutting through the panic. "Breathe, my dear. You're unharmed." She knelt, examining the gun without touching it. The barrel was warm, the chamber loaded with a live rounder. Dangerous oversight, or something more deliberate. Lionel stormed over, his face a storm of fury and fear. "Who checked that gun? This is a disaster." He rounded on the prop master, Tommy, who stammered, "I swear, Mr. Hurst, it was blanks this morning. I checked myself." Miss Marple's eyes flicked to Lionel, whose hands shook as he raked them through his hair. "Mr. Hurst," she said, her tone even, "might we inspect the mirror?" It seems to be at the heart of these incidents. He hesitated, then nodded curtly. Fine, but it's just a prop. With the crew's help, the mirror was tilted forward, revealing its heavy wooden backing. Miss Marple's sharp eyes caught a faint seam, almost invisible. She pressed gently, and a small panel clicked open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a folded note, its paper brittle but intact. She unfolded it carefully, revealing a scrawl in faded ink to claim. The mirror's power, blood must mark the frame, RK. A murmur rippled through the crew. Clara clutched Miss Marple's arm. Roland Kane, she whispered. Lillian's lover. Lionel's face drained of colour. That's nonsense, he snapped, but his voice wavered. Some old prank. Miss Marple tucked the note into her handkerchief, her mind racing. The note's cryptic message suggested a ritual, or perhaps a deliberate misdirection. Roland Kane's initials tied it to Lillian's error, but the live round in the gun pointed to a present threat. Was Lionel's obsession with the mirror rooted in this note, or was he covering for someone else? She turned to Victor, who had recovered his composure and was brushing dust from his suit. Mr. Blake, you were near the prop table earlier. Did you see anyone tampering with the gun? Victor's smile was smooth, but his eyes were wary. Me, I was running lines. Miss Marple asked the script girl she vouched for me. I shall, Miss Marple said, her tone pleasant but unyielding. She guided Clara away, leaving Lionel to berate the crew. In the starlet's dressing room, Miss Marple brewed tea, her movements deliberate as she processed the day's events. Clara, tell me about Lionel. Has he always been so intense about this film? Clara sank onto a chaise, her hands twisting. He's always been driven, but this project's different. He talks about the mirror like it's alive, says it'll make the film legendary. I caught him sketching those symbols from the frame once, muttering about unlocking its potential. It scared me. Miss Marple nodded, her needles resuming their rhythm. Lionel's behavior suggested more than artistic passion, perhaps a belief in the mirror's supposed power. The note's mention of blood was troubling, especially with the gun's misfire. Was someone testing the mirror's myth, or using it as a cover for sabotage? A soft tap at the door announced Tommy, his face anxious. Miss Marple, I checked the prop log. That gun was signed out by Lionel himself this morning. Said he wanted to inspect it personally. Thank you, Tommy, Miss Marple said, her eyes sharpening. You've been most helpful. As Tommy left, Miss Marple sipped her tea, her thoughts aligning like stitches in a pattern. The note was a breakthrough, tying the mirror to Roland Kane and, by extension, Lillian's scandal. Lionel's involvement with the gun raised questions. Was he reckless or complicit? Victor's alibi needed checking, and the photo's depiction of Evelyn Hart's glare hinted at a motive rooted in jealousy or revenge. She glanced at her knitting, a lavender scarf lengthening steadily. The day had brought clarity, narrowing her focus to Lionel's obsession and the note's cryptic warning. The mirror's power, if it existed, was likely a human construct, but the danger was real. Someone had loaded that gun, and Miss Marple felt a quiet satisfaction in having uncovered the compartment and its secret. Tomorrow, she'd confront Lionel and verify Victor's alibi, pulling the threads tighter. For now, she settled into her chair, the bungalow's silence a canvas for her thoughts, the mystery's shape emerging with each careful stitch. Chapter 5. The starlet's fear. The late afternoon sun cast a golden haze over Sunset Studios, but the air inside Clara Vane's bungalow was heavy with unease. Miss Jane Marple sat across from the starlet. Her knitting needles paused as Clara clutched a silk handkerchief, her green eyes darting to the window as if expecting an intruder. The discovery of the hidden note in the mirror's compartment, with its ominous mention of blood and Roland Kane's initials, had sharpened Miss Marple's focus, yet Clara's fear, raw and palpable, demanded attention. Today, Miss Marple aimed to unravel the starlet's secrets and trace the mirror's past to its source. Clara's hands trembled as she poured tea, the china clinking softly. "Miss Marple, I can't go on like this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The gun yesterday, it was meant for Victor, but it could have been me. And those letters, they started weeks ago, before the mirror even arrived. Letters." Miss Marple's eyes sharpened behind her spectacles. "You didn't mention those before, my dear. Tell me everything." Clara hesitated, then crossed to a lacquered box on her vanity. She unlocked it with a small key and withdrew a bundle of envelopes, their edges crumpled. "They come every few days, slipped under my dressing room door or left in my trailer. No postmark, no signature." She handed them to Miss Marple, who noted the heavy black ink and precise, almost mechanical handwriting. The first letter read, "Leave the silver veil or face the mirror's wrath." Another warned, "The curse claims those who defy it. Quit now." The most recent, dated 2 days ago, was chilling. "Lillian's fate awaits you. The mirror sees all." Miss Marple's lips pursed as she folded the letters, her mind cataloguing their tone. The reference to Lillian Duval suggested a deep knowledge of the mirror's history, but the threats felt calculated, designed to unnerve. "Who have you shown these to?" Miss Marple asked, her voice gentle but firm. "Nobody," Clara admitted, her cheeks flushing. "I thought they were a prank at first. But after the accidents, the camera, the spotlight, the gun, I'm terrified. Someone wants me off this film, and I think it's tied to that wretched mirror." Miss Marple patted her hand, her touch reassuring. "You've done well to tell me, Clara. Now, think carefully. Has anyone on the set mentioned Lillian Duval? Or her scandal with Evelyn Hart and Roland Kane?" Clara frowned, her brow furrowing. "Not exactly. But Lionel's been obsessed with the mirror's history, saying it's the key to the film's authenticity. And Victor, he's been digging into old studio records, claiming it's for his role. I caught him reading a biography of Lillian once, but he brushed it off." Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts aligning. Victor's interest in Lillian, Lionel's fixation on the mirror, and now these letters pointed to a deliberate campaign. But was it personal or tied to the mirrors? Myth. She tucked the letters into her bag, intending to compare their handwriting to the note from the mirror's compartment. "Let's take a walk, my dear," Miss Marple suggested. "Fresh air will do you good, and I'd like to visit the set." Reluctantly, Clara agreed, and they stepped into the bustling studio lot. The soundstage was alive with activity, the crew preparing for a night shoot. The mirror stood in its usual place, its surface catching the arc lights in a way that seemed to pulse. Miss Marple observed the crew. Tommy, the prop master, was adjusting a chandelier. Mitch, the disgruntled grip, lingered near a rigging station, his expression sullen. Victor was nowhere in sight, but Lionel prowled the set, his clipboard clutched like a shield. As they approached the mirror, Clara froze, her breath catching. "Look," she whispered, pointing. A faint scratch marred the frame, barely visible among the carved vines. Miss Marple leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. The scratch formed a single word: betrayer. It was fresh, the wood beneath still pale. Goodness, Miss Marple murmured, her fingers hovering over the mark. This wasn't here yesterday. Before Clara could respond, a low hum filled the air, and the mirror's surface shimmered. The crew gasped as the glass seemed to ripple, then shattered with a deafening crack, shards scattering across the floor. Clara screamed, clutching Miss Marple, who remained steady, her eyes scanning the chaos. The crew surged forward, shouting. But no one was hurt. The shards had fallen harmlessly, as if guided. Lionel stormed over, his face a mask of fury. What now? This production is cursed. He rounded on the crew, demanding answers, but Miss Marple's attention was on the mirror's frame, now empty. A faint inscription, previously hidden by the glass, was carved into the inner edge. To bind the soul, offer the heart's truth. Miss Marple's pulse quickened. The inscription, like the note, hinted at a ritualistic belief tied to the mirror. She knelt, examining the shards, and noticed a small, metallic object, among them a tiny gear, out of place in an antique. She pocketed it discreetly, her mind racing. The shattering was no accident. Someone had tampered with the mirror, perhaps, using a mechanism to trigger the break. Clara, she said, guiding the trembling starlet away. We need to find the studio vault. Lillian's journal mentioned it, and this inscription suggests answers lie there. Clara nodded, her fear tempered by Miss Marple's calm. I heard Lionel talk about a vault once, in the old storage wing. It's locked, but he has a key, Miss. Marple's lips curved slightly. Lionel's involvement was growing harder to dismiss. She led Clara to the production office, where a harried assistant provided directions to the storage wing, a neglected corner of the studio lot. The vault was rumored to hold relics from the silent era, sealed since the 1920s. As they walked, Miss Marple probed further. Clara, these letters, did they start before or after Lionel brought the mirror to the set? Before, Clara said, her voice steadier. A week or two before. I thought it was a jealous fan at first, but now I don't know. The storage wing was a labyrinth of dusty crates and cobwebbed shelves. Miss Marple's sensible shoes echoed on the concrete floor as they navigated to a heavy steel door, its lock gleaming despite the grime. This must be it, she said. Examining the mechanism, we'll need Lionel's key. As if summoned, Lionel appeared, his face drawn. Miss Marple, what are you doing here? This area's off limits, merely following a lead, Mr. Hurst, she replied, her tone mild. The mirror's inscription suggests answers in this vault. Might you open it for us? Lionel's jaw tightened, but he produced a key, his movements reluctant. There's nothing in there but old props. You're wasting your time. The vault door creaked open, revealing a dim chamber filled with relics, tarnished candelabras, faded costumes, and a stack of film canisters. Miss Marple's eyes scanned the space, landing on a small, locked box engraved with the same symbols as the mirror's frame. Clara, help me with this, she said, pointing Dot. As Clara reached for the box, a loud clang echoed behind them. The vault door slammed shut, trapping them inside. Lionel's silhouette vanished through the narrowing gap, his voice cold. You're meddling in things you don't understand, Miss Marple. Clara gasped, pounding on the door. But Miss Marple remained calm, her mind already working. Hush, my dear. We'll find a way out. She examined the box, its lock simple but sturdy. Using a hairpin from her bag, she worked the mechanism, her fingers deft despite her age. The lock clicked, and inside she found a single documenta. Contract between Roland Kane and Evelyn Hart, dated 1924, promising her a starring role in exchange for silence about Lillian's affair. "This changes everything," Miss Marple murmured. The contract suggested Evelyn's betrayal was financial, not romantic, but it didn't explain the mirror's role. A faint draft caught her attention, and she traced it to a loose panel in the vault's wall. With Clara's help, she pried it open, revealing a narrow service tunnel leading to the lot. They emerged into the night air, dusty but unharmed. Clara clutched the contract, her eyes wide. "Lionel locked us in. Why?" "Perhaps he fears what we'll uncover," Miss Marple said, her voice steady. "But we've found a piece of the puzzle, and that's enough for now." Back in Clara's bungalow, Miss Marple brewed tea, her thoughts racing. The letters, the inscription, the contractual pointed to a motive rooted in Lillian's scandal. But the mirror's shattering and Lionel's actions suggested a modern hand. The gear among the shards hinted at sabotage, not supernatural forces. She felt a quiet satisfaction. The vault's contents had clarified Evelyn's role, and Lionel's desperation marked him as a key player. Tomorrow she'd confront him and trace the gear's origin, tightening the net around the saboteur. For now, she sipped her tea, her knitting resuming its rhythm. The day's discoveries a solid step toward unraveling Hollywood's dark heart. Chapter 6. The Vault of Secrets. The morning mist clung to the grounds of Sunset Studios, lending an air of mystery to the sprawling lot. Miss Jane Marple, her knitting bag tucked under her arm, stepped purposefully toward the storage wing, her mind alight with the previous day's revelations. The contract between Roland Kane and Evelyn Hart, found in the locked vault, had painted a picture of betrayal and ambition in Lillian Duval's era. The mirror's shattered glass and the mysterious gear among its shards pointed to sabotage in the present. Today, Miss Marple aimed to explore the vault further and confront the shadowy figure behind the escalating incidents. Clara Vane, still shaken from their near entrapment in the vault, insisted on accompanying her. "I can't stay away, Miss Marple," she said, her voice resolute despite the tremor in her hands. "If Lionel's involved, I need to know why." "Very well, my dear," Miss Marple replied, her tone calm but her eyes sharp. "But stay close and say nothing unless I ask." She patted Clara's arm, her presence a steadying force as they approached the storage wing's steel door, now ajar after their escape through the service tunnel. The vault was as they'd left. It a dim chamber of relics, dust motes swirling in the faint light. Miss Marple's gaze swept over the shelves, landing on a leather-bound journal half hidden behind a stack of film canisters. Its cover bore the same serpentine symbols as the mirror's frame. She opened it carefully, revealing pages filled with Roland Kane's angular script. The entries detailed the mirror's origins, a gift from an eccentric collector who claimed it was forged in a ritual to capture desires. Roland dismissed it as folklore but noted Lillian's growing obsession, writing. She sees Evelyn in the glass, accusing her. "It's driving her mad." Clara peered over Miss Marple's shoulder, her breath catching. "It's like the mirror's alive, feeding on their feud." "Not alive, perhaps," Miss Marple said, her voice measured, "but certainly a tool for manipulation. This journal suggests the curse was a story Roland encouraged to control Lillian." She tucked the journal into her bag, her mind connecting the dots to the threatening letters Clara had received, each echoing Lillian's fate. As they sifted through the vault, a faint creak echoed from the tunnel they'd used to escape. Miss Marple signaled for silence, her senses alert. Footsteps approached, deliberate and slow. She guided Clara behind a crate. Her knitting needle stilled as a figure emerged, a cloaked silhouette, face obscured by a scarf. The figure moved toward the locked box they'd opened yesterday, producing a key and rummaging inside. Miss Marple stepped forward, her voice calm but commanding. "Good morning. Might I ask what you're looking for?" The figure froze, then spun, revealing a pair of sharp blue eyes above the scarf. "Stay out of this, old lady," a muffled voice hissed. "You're digging too deep." Clara gasped. But Miss Marple's expression remained serene. "I find that the deeper one digs, the clearer the truth becomes. Why don't you tell me about the mirror?" The figure lunged, aiming to shove past, but Miss Marple, with surprising agility, sidestepped and tripped them with her umbrella. The scarf fell, revealing a young woman, Sally, a junior lighting technician with a nervous demeanor Miss Marple had noted on the set. Sally scrambled to her feet, her face pale. "I didn't mean any harm. I just wanted to protect it." "Protect what?" Miss Marple asked, her tone gentle but unyielding. "The mirror, or something else?" Sally's shoulders slumped, her defiance crumbling. "The mirror. My grandmother worked here in Lillian's day. She told me stories, said the mirror held power, that it could make or break a star. When Lionel brought it out, I got scared. I sent the letters to Clara, rigged the projector, even tampered with the gun. I thought if I scared her off, the mirror would stay safe." Clara's eyes widened. "You nearly killed Victor." "I didn't mean to," Sally cried, tears welling. "The gun was supposed to misfire harmlessly. I just wanted the film to stop, to keep the mirror hidden." Miss Marple's mind raced. Sally's confession explained the letters and the projector, but the gear in the mirrors, shards, and the vault's trap suggested a larger hand at work. "Sally, who else knows about your grandmother's stories?" Sally hesitated, then muttered, "Lionel. He came to me weeks ago, asking about the mirror's history. Said he wanted to use its legend for publicity. I told him what I knew, but he got strange. Kept talking about unlocking its power." Miss Marple nodded, her suspicions about Lionel deepening. "And the gear I found in the mirror's remains. Was that your doing?" Sally frowned, confused. "Gear? No, I didn't touch the mirror itself. I just scratched that word betrayer to scare Clara." Before Miss Marple could press further, a loud groan echoed through the vault. The floor beneath them shuddered, and a trap door hidden under a rug gave way, sending Clara and Sally tumbling into a shallow pit. Miss Marple, standing just beyond, gripped a shelf for balance, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. The pit was lined with old props, harmless but startling. "Stay calm," she called, peering down. She spotted a rusty lever in the wall, and pulled it, triggering a mechanism that raised the trapdoor. Clara and Sally climbed out, shaken but unharmed. A relic of the studio's early days, perhaps, Miss Marple mused, examining the trap, or a deliberate trap for meddlers. Sally, trembling, clutched Miss Marple's arm. "I swear, I didn't know about that. Someone else must have set it." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. The trap, like the gear, pointed to a more sophisticated saboteur. She helped Clara and Sally out of the vault, her mind cataloguing the evidence. Sally's confession was a breakthrough, but it didn't explain Lionel's role or the mirror's mechanical tampering. The journal's mention of a ritual suggested a psychological game, one someone was playing with deadly intent. They returned to Clara's bungalow, where Miss Marple brewed tea to steady their nerves. Sally sat, head bowed, as Clara paced. "What now?" Clara asked. "Sally's behind the letters, but someone else is pulling strings." "Indeed," Miss Marple said, her needles resuming their rhythm. "Sally, you'll need to speak to the authorities, but I'll ensure you're treated fairly. Your fear was manipulated, I suspect, by someone with deeper motives." Sally nodded, her voice small. "I'm sorry, Clara. I thought I was protecting something sacred." Clara softened, her anger fading. "Just don't do it again." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her thoughts aligning. The journal confirmed the mirror's myth was a tool of control, likely used by Roland to manipulate Lillian. Sally's actions echoed that manipulation, but the gear and trapdoor pointed to a modern Lionel, perhaps, or even Victor, whose interest in Lillian's history remained suspect. The contract and Evelyn's role suggested a financial motive, but the mirror's destruction felt personal. As evening fell, Miss Marple felt a quiet satisfaction. Sally's confession had clarified part of the puzzle, ruling out the supernatural and exposing a human hand behind the accidents. The journal and trapdoor were new threads, pointing to a larger conspiracy. Tomorrow, she'd confront Lionel about his role and trace the gear's origin, perhaps to a crew member with mechanical skill. For now, she settled into her chair, her knitting a steady rhythm, the day's discoveries a firm step toward unraveling the mirror's deadly legacy. Chapter 7. The final scene. The golden haze of a Hollywood sunset bathed Sunset Studios, but the soundstage of the Silver Veil was a cauldron of tension. Miss Jane Marple stood at its edge, her knitting bag resting by her feet, her eyes scanning the gathered cast and crew. The mirror, now a shattered relic, had been removed, its frame stored in the prop room under lock and key. Sally, the junior lighting technician, was in custody, her confession to the threatening letters and projector trick a key piece of the puzzle. Yet the gear in the mirror's shards, the trapdoor in the vault, and Lionel Hurst's evasions pointed to a deeper conspiracy. Tonight, Miss Marple intended to unravel it. Bringing the mystery to a close, the crew buzzed with nervous energy, their whispers hushed as Lionel called for a final rehearsal. Clara Vane, radiant in a crimson gown, stood center stage, her nerves tempered by Miss Marple's steady presence. Victor Blake, polished as ever, adjusted his cufflinks, his smile masking a flicker of unease. Miss Marple had spent the morning verifying alibis, Victor's claim of running lines during the gun incident held, but his obsession with Lillian Duval's biography and sketches of the mirror's symbols raised questions. Lionel's role in locking the vault door was undeniable, and his fixation on the mirror's power suggested a dangerous belief that Miss Marple had requested everyone gather on the set, ostensibly to discuss the production's future. She stood quietly, her grey hair catching the light, her demeanor that of a kindly aunt, yet her eyes were sharp as she addressed the crowd. "Good evening, everyone. I've asked you here to put an end to the troubles plaguing the Silver Veil. The mirror, it seems, has cast a long shadow, but not one of curses, only human ambition and fear." Lionel shifted, his clipboard clutched tightly. "Miss Marple, we've a film to finish. Let's not indulge in theatrics." "No theatrics, Mr. Hurst," she replied, her voice calm but commanding. "Only truth. The mirrors, accidents, the camera, the spotlight, the gun were no curse." Sally confessed to the letters and the projector, driven by stories of Lillian Duval's era, but the mirror is shattering, the trapdoor and the live round point to a more calculated hand. Clara's eyes widened, and Victor's smile faltered. Miss Marple continued, her tone measured. Lillian's journal and the contract between Roland Kane and Evelyn Hart revealed a scandal of ambition, not love. Evelyn was promised a role for her silence, but Lillian's disappearance ended that deal. The mirror, with its tales of capturing desires, was Roland's tool to control her. Someone here believed that myth and sought to use it. She turned to Lionel, her gaze piercing. "Mr. Hurst, you locked Clara and me in the vault. You inspected the prop gun yourself, and your sketches of the mirror's symbols suggest an unhealthy obsession." "Why?" Lionel's face reddened. "I was protecting the film. The mirror's legend was perfect for publicity. I got carried away researching its history. Locking the vault was a mistake. Panicked when you got too close to the truth. And what truth is that?" Miss Marple pressed, her voice soft but unrelenting. Before Lionel could answer, Victor stepped forward, his charm replaced by a cold edge. "Enough, Miss Marple. You're grasping at straws. The mirror's gone. The accidents are over. Let's move on." Miss Marple's eyes flicked to him. "Not quite, Mr. Blake. You've been studying Lillian's life, sketching the mirrors. Symbols you were seen in the catwalks before the spotlight fell, and your interest in the mirror goes beyond curiosity. Care to explain?" Victor laughed, but it was strained. "Character research, nothing more. You're seeing conspiracies where there are none." "Then perhaps you'll explain this," Miss Marple said, producing the gear she'd found among the mirror's shards. This was embedded in the mirror's frame, part of a mechanism to shatter it. A stagehand identified it as a custom piece from the lighting department, where you've been seen tinkering. The crew murmured, and Victor's jaw tightened. "That's absurd. Anyone could have planted that." Miss Marple's voice remained steady. "Perhaps, but the letters to Clara began before the mirror arrived, suggesting a plan to disrupt the film. The contract showed Evelyn's motive was financial, not romantic. I believe someone saw the mirror as a chance to revive that old grudge, using its myth to sow chaos." She turned to the crew, her gaze sweeping over them. The trapdoor in the vault was rigged recently, its mechanism oiled. Only someone with access to the storage wing could have set it. "Lionel, you have the key, but Victor, you've been seen there too, researching props late at night." Victor's composure cracked. He lunged toward the prop room door, but Miss Marple's voice stopped him cold. "Mr. Blake, running won't help. I've spoken to the script girl. She confirms you weren't with her during the gun incident. You were near the prop table, and your sketches include a diagram of a shattering mechanism." The crew gasped, and Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Victor, why? I trusted you." Victor's shoulders slumped, his charm evaporating. "It wasn't personal, Clara. I found Evelyn's diaries in the archives her deal with Roland, her rage at Lillian. I thought, if I could scare you off, I'd take the lead, rewrite the script to focus on my character. The mirror was perfect. Everyone was already spooked. I rigged the gear, sent the letters, even paid Sally to help with the projector, but I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt." Lionel stared, stunned. "You idiot. You nearly ruined us all." Miss Marple's expression softened, but her voice held firm. "Ambition is a dangerous thing, Mr. Blake. You used Lillian's myth to manipulate, just as Roland did. But the mirror's power was only ever in the minds of those who believed it." She turned to the crew. "The accidents were human, not supernatural. Sally's fear, Victor's greed, and Lionel's obsession created a perfect storm. The mirror is gone, and with it, the fear it fed. Clara's eyes glistened, but she stood taller. "Thank you, Miss Marple. I can finish the film now, knowing it's over." Miss Marple smiled, her needles clicking once more. "You'll shine, my dear. You always have." The crew dispersed, Victor escorted away by studio security, his career in tatters. Lionel, chastened, promised to cooperate with authorities. Miss Marple lingered, watching as the set was cleared for the next day's shoot. The mirror's frame, now empty, was a relic of a bygone era, its myth dispelled by logic and observation. Back in Clara's bungalow, Miss Marple packed her knitting, her valise ready for the journey home. Clara poured tea, her hands steady for the first time in weeks. "Will you stay for the premiere?" she asked. Miss Marple chuckled. "Oh, my dear, I'm far too fond of my quiet village, but I'll look for your name in the papers." As she boarded the Rolls-Royce to the port, Miss Marple glanced back at the studio's gilded gates. The mystery was solved, its threads, letters, gears, traps, and old scandals woven into a clear pattern. Victor's confession had closed the case, and Sally's misguided loyalty was a lesson in fear's power. Lionel's role, though reckless, was secondary. The mirror, for all its allure, was just glass, its curse a story spun by human desires. She settled into the car, her knitting resumed, a lavender scarf nearly complete. Hollywood's glamour had dazzled, but its shadows were no match for her. Keen-eyed, as the city faded behind her, Miss Marple felt a deep satisfaction, the puzzle resolved. The curtain fallen on a drama as old as ambition itself. St. Mary Mead awaited, and with it the quiet joys of home.